Hi everyone and welcome to Lockdown Dads. This is episode number 8. My name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm a coach. My business is called Inspiring Dads and I have 2 children. I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son.
And I'm James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit, editor of workingdads.co.uk and father to 2 children, 2 different children who are aged 12 and 9. Each week we're trying to bring you an interesting, provocative, relevant discussion to your life in lockdown. I think we're still in lockdown of a sort, maybe semi-lockdown now. And to that end, we're joined this week by the constantly curious, that's what it says on his LinkedIn, constantly curious, Hanson Lee, founder and owner, editor, big chief boss of Daddilife, the website Daddilife. We start with a very, what used to be a very boring question, but has become a very loaded question these days. Hanson, how are you?
Well, thank you for asking. First of all, thanks for having me on. How am I? I am all right. I think the last few weeks, I say the first few weeks of lockdown were absolute hell on earth in terms of everything piling on top of each other, finding literally zero balance with school working. So I should say, sorry, as well as doing all the Daddilife stuff, I'm father to Max, who's 5 years old. And so homeschooling him was a very, very different sort of shift, I have to say. But the last few weeks, I think we found more of a routine, a bit more of a balance. So it's been all right the last few weeks, but I think with many others across the UK, probably in a similar position of just ready to return to some kind of new normal, whatever that might be.
And the change came about because you turned into a werewolf? I think that's what I read on LinkedIn or something, is that right? So
Max and I we do a lot of Legos together. And we'll often build sometimes depictions of each other or depictions of things that we want to play with. And just one time during lockdown, it was probably the first few weeks actually that he did it. And he just kind of created this Lego figure of me at my desk. And he was just pretty much saying, this is you, just the Wolfman at his desk. And it was probably one of the things that really hit me hardest actually, because it's just the last thing I'd ever want him to think of me as. And that, I say, has probably been the central trigger of me just trying to change things up a little bit and just to make sure that whatever time we've got together, it's not always just going to be possible for me to have pure 100% focus time with him. But I think we can definitely carve out more slots and just make sure that he knows when it's his time, it's all him. And sometimes when it's not, then he kind of understands a bit better why.
I think there's a lot to be said for that, isn't it? As a lockdown dad, and particularly dads, I think, who are work to do is it's on you to some extent to carve out that time. He's a kid at the end of the day. It's not on him to try and carve out time with you. It's very much on you to carve out time with him. And as you can see, it's not that difficult if you just build it into your life.
Yeah, and I'm probably a bit lucky in that I can do that, and it didn't take necessarily. It just took me to sort of reframe a few things in my head and around work, and just be honest with a few people at work as well about getting the best out of me, to be honest. But I can totally appreciate that in other situations, it probably will be very different questions. But it was a big trigger point for me, certainly.
How do you think it differs being a single dad as it might do with having sort of both partners in a couple sort of more around together? Do you think there's any difference, or what kind of differences have you experienced, Hanson?
It's a good question. So I guess I've seen it both sides. So obviously I'm separated from Max's mum, so I'm, if you like, single dad 50% of the week. And I'd say that half of the week is definitely, everything is just a total flip up in the air, because you're the only parent there for him. So everything is dependent on you. And I think where I've seen it work better for couples, but in a way they've got similar but different challenges. So similar in that children, whether 1, 2 or many, they're always going to want that quality time with sometimes either parent or both parents. And I think parents that are living together are still in a relationship. I've heard sort of better success stories in terms of trying to do morning shift versus afternoon shift and that sort of thing. But I think reality bites that sometimes just even that's not possible. So I think a lot of families, to be honest, are just trying to make the best that they can. It was interesting because I was on a BBC segment talking about children returning to school. And one of the things that was definitely a big theme of that whole thing was just how much working parents in particular are struggling, really, because we're just not necessarily made for some of us I think are very keen teachers, but we're not teachers by the whole. So I think to do that on top of everything else has been a huge challenge. But do you know what? In some ways, I think it has brought people closer together, and hopefully it has made people reflect on a bit more what really matters. Because I think I've definitely taken for granted, pre-COVID, the things that we now cherish as really special things, like even going to the shops, seeing loved ones, or those sorts of things. And I think maybe family time and what that means for our ways of work, maybe the best of that is yet to come.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to the changes that people want to make very shortly, but let's just round up how everybody's feeling. How's your week been, Ian? How are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm all right. I feel energized because I've had a nap in the last half hour. So I got woken up at 4:20. Fans of this show will realise I have two cats, one who's noisy and one who's not. The noisy one's allowed to stay. It gets kicked out of this bedroom that I record in, and the quiet one gets to stay. But the noisy cat, 4:20, and again at 5:30, and he was very insistent that someone had to get up and let him out and feed him or whatever else. So I kind of a little bit weary today. And my daughter was doing ballet before we came on. My son was doing his grandfather cards for Father's Day. And I just put my feet up slightly and I just rested my eyes. And before I knew it, he was talking to me and I had no idea what he was saying. And it became apparent that I had in fact fallen asleep at the dining room table, which doubles up as the current homework / my office. So yeah, I had a little nap, which refreshed me no end. But beyond that, it's we went on our longest walk yet. We've been for the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've been really, really good at making sure we go for a family walk on either a Saturday or Sunday. Initially, I was working both Saturday and Sunday, but realizing we were just on this treadmill of doing stuff and trying to keep it a little bit simpler and build in a bit of sort of outdoor activity and activity together. Because it's the only time during the week we eat together, but it's the only time during the week where all four of us are sort of together and doing something. We go out for a walk. And so we took them for 10K on Saturday, which was our longest yet. Nice little route around Otford and Shoreham. You might know it actually, James, that particular route.
Oh yes,
you should say that in a second. But we had a great. But it was great. It was longer. It went up and down. Great views of London from that part of Kent, just not too far away from us. But yeah. So tell me about your. Did you go for a walk this week as well, James?
Well, strangely enough, I did actually, and I went round Otford because that is the best place to go for a walk. It turns out, yeah, that was a bit of a weird coincidence. Having put my pictures of our walk round Otford on Sunday on Facebook, your replies of exactly the same photos from 24 hours previously. Because there's clearly, that's the only thing I'd say about the walk round Otford. It's not that interesting actually. There's clearly only a limited number of pictures to take because we both took exactly the same pictures with our family in exactly the same spots.
There's a lovely view of a valley, isn't there? A valley looking towards a QE2 bridge.
Yeah, it was a big old ramble though, wasn't it? I don't know. We don't think we did 10K. I think ours was like 5.5 miles. I think that's 10K. So we must have taken a shortcut somewhere and dashed back in time for a nice cold bottle of Fanta at the end of it. Oh, that was amazing.
Nice.
Hot muggy day. Oh.
And was a cold bottle of Fanta, was that reward enough for your children for the effort they'd gone to tramping around the Kent countryside?
Yeah, kind of. They weren't terribly into it, to be honest. I mean, some you win, some you lose. They did it, so that's good. But they weren't terribly into it. They were a bit whiny. But I think overall, I think it did good to get out of the city and have a walk around. And I think I don't know. Yeah, I think this week I'm feeling particularly grateful for the outdoors. My son was just doing a PSE thing for school about having a balanced life, and one of the things was going outside. I was like, yeah, it's little things that you take for granted. Not least because at lunchtime today there was a massive thunderstorm came over. We couldn't at lunchtime. Usually the kids would have their lunch and then have a little just run around in the garden, but they
kick
couldn't.
them out.
Like the cats, put them out. But I'm quite grateful for the great outdoors this week. But generally, I think we're back into the rhythm of school and things are a bit calmer than they were perhaps a couple of weeks ago, where things felt quite intense. Let's talk about the future. I haven't talked about now. I want to talk about the when I'm 64. Still haven't got the music. Got to imagine the song by the Beatles, because obviously we can't afford the actual song. because Hanson's got some interesting research. And I use interesting not as that sounded like I was like, oh, interesting. I mean, because it's
printed it off.
interesting. I think there's a lot. Yeah, it sounded like I was using interesting in a politician's way there, but no, not at all. It's interesting. About what men have been doing in lockdown and what they want to do going forward. You know, when we're 64, what they might look back at this period, whether it will spur change or not. What are the sort of headlines from that research that jumped out to you, Hanson?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think it kind of just continues on from some of the research we did last year with Deloitte called the Millennial Dad at Work. And the trigger really for that research was around how a lot of home dynamics and around how a lot of the more modern day dad attitudes have shifted tremendously at home, but actually a number of workplace cultures probably just haven't followed as quickly. So that piece last year really was a program that started to look in more detail about what was happening in the workplace, what needed to start to shift, where some of that burden lay in particular, and actually how dads were starting to vote with their feet. And I think this time, I guess what we wanted to do as an extension of that was there was a lot of research that came out sort of in April, May, particularly around the role of mums and lockdown. And a lot of it made a lot of sense. But I guess as a researcher myself, I've done a lot of research before my background, that it just felt that there was a certain narrative and a certain scenario being painted there, almost harking back to sort of 1950s men and workplaces. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with some of that. I think some of that has come about, but I think as ever with these things, and with a journalism background as well, sometimes like the headlines that you take into it can kind of really skew opinion about what the real data is showing. So I guess we just wanted to do our own exploration just to see actually what's actually happening from a dad's point of view as well. And it's interesting that actually 76% of our research said that they had actually become more involved day to day in parenting. And in particular, when we look at some of the key areas, there's some really interesting ones. So 83% said they're more involved in day-to-day play, 70% cleaning up, which I think may be debatable and contentious out there for some people, cooking for the kids, 67%, homeschooling, 51%. But I think where it also got more interesting is beyond just day-to-day, what reflections is lockdown giving dads? And what we found there was particularly interesting. So certainly improving quality time with family was an area where almost a third, so 32% said that they're actively changing post-lockdown. 25%, so a quarter, requesting more flexible working, 19% then additional to that, requesting more remote working in particular, 16% looking for a new job entirely. And I think what's interesting there is that you've got, on the face of it, two sort of pieces of research, if you like, in terms of what the dad story is saying and what perhaps the mums and women's story is saying, that on the face of it might seem quite contrary. And I guess what we covered in the article is that actually I don't think it is necessarily contrary at all. I think in a way they speak both collectively about what's happening around modern day family, but also around kind of individual perceptions and realities of what's still happening at home or what isn't happening at home. And I think that's kind of the interesting debate for me, really, around, are we actually at a stage, or can we be at a stage where we use lockdown and COVID to start to really push the agenda about what gender equality really does mean at work and at home? So that's why I think personally both can be quite, I wouldn't say complementary, but in a way, when you add them both together, they paint to a bigger question. And that's what I'm particularly interested in. And it's a complex question, it wouldn't necessarily be solved in an hour, but it's certainly the sort of thing that I think we need to be pushing the button on more.
Yeah, I think that's key. That's why it was interesting, because you had these two parts. One of what men are doing, which is a very contentious part, because as you say, men say they're doing more. Well, all right, but probably starting from a very low base. And as you mentioned, I think on Daddilife, there's research that men say they're doing more and women are saying they're doing less.
Yeah.
Okay, hello.
Yeah.
And then, the one thing I thought, the really interesting part of that research was that the one thing most men say they're doing, or most men say they're doing more of, is play. It's like, well, that's the nice stuff, isn't it? Yeah, well done, everybody. You've still got to actually clean the dishes. But, that's contentious, but it's interesting and valuable, but particularly when it feeds into the second bit, which I thought was sort of more positive, perhaps, because you can then strip out a more positive future from it, which is, as you say, men looking to change their lives and their balance and do more going forward. And no matter how contentious what they're actually doing now might be, the important thing is that something's changed just now, and they want to take that forward. But the stat you mentioned there that I was particularly interested in was the one, because as you mentioned in the millennial dads report, there was about a third of dads said they would be looking for a new job to get more flexible work and all the rest of it. This time around, you've got 19% of dads saying that they might be looking for a new job. Now, there's a difference there. What's going on there? Is that because there's a fear that the economy is about to go down the pan, and looking for a new job maybe doesn't seem like such a good idea? Or what's your take on what's changed there?
Yeah, so the millennial dad stuff, it said that a third of dads had already changed since becoming a father, and then another third were essentially actively looking. Whereas this one talked about 16% looking for a new job or actively thinking about looking for a new job post lockdown. And so you could argue that that's probably around about half-ish really of it. I think there's certainly a lot of economic factors around people being relatively unclear about what the future holds. I mean, we've seen the latest some of the economic studies that have come out in the last couple of days around productivity levels and around workforce levels and around people on sort of income support and that side of things. And even like governments in Spain are now trialing universal basic income they've just passed. So there's a lot that's starting to shift there. And I think there certainly will be some short-term pain. I think the Chancellor even talked about it himself, saying even now there's going to be some short-term pain for sure. So I think there is a sense of sit tight. I guess one thing that's so interesting though, if you add up the fact that a quarter of people were looking at more flexible working, another 19% looking at more remote working, I guess I almost see them wanting to try and do what they can to change within their own environments first. And if they can't do that, then actually not being totally shut off to kind of voting with their feet, so to speak. And I think with this one as well, even though the millennial dad stuff was very, very focused on pure millennial, whereas this one actually went out to a slightly older or wider, I should say, group, a sort of wider demographic. The majority of it was still sort of millennial, but you kind of got bigger skews on the sort of outskirts of that as well. So it'd be interesting if we'd done it purely focused on millennial dads, what that might have yielded. Because actually one thing that was interesting with the millennial dad stuff was the younger the age range, the higher those figures were. So actually for the 24 to 29 bracket, the amount of dads who'd actually changed jobs was, I think, near to 40% actually. And the amount actively looking was, I think it was 38%. So we actually found the younger, the higher, it skews even more.
I thought there's a really interesting kind of positive story in there, is that men had experienced they'd experienced the benefits of flexible and remote working, and I guess part of it is they're hoping that will continue, and therefore they won't need to look for another job. They, like you said, within the framework of what they've got at the moment, if that flexible working, remote working can continue, then they won't need to go anywhere else. And maybe people's eyes have been open to the opportunity that actually it's not perfect by any means, and you wouldn't design working from home in this way in many ways. In any way, actually, let's be honest. Let's just turn off childcare and school, and then just everyone tries to do what they were previously doing. You wouldn't obviously go about it in that way, but the opportunity is there that actually it can work, and therefore possibly fewer dads think they need to move to get what they need. It is a positive story in there. I mean, I love the bit around, studies seem to suggest that men consistently overestimate what they do in relation to what women report, and that's often a challenge with some of these self-reporting bits, and it amuses me because it's kind of like you can imagine the scenario where those aspects are kind of don't sort of match up. But I think it's a really positive story, as James says, in terms of what men want to do in the future, and how that's going to transition. I mean, what do you think, Hanson, in terms of the next 6 months? Where do you think the pressure points are in terms of matching up what the experience that men have had, or lots of men who've worked from home have had, versus actually maintaining maintaining that interest and the practical element of actually remote working, flexible working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess I'd almost reframe the question as, how do we make sure that the next 6 months can be the right opportunity? Because there's still, we're certainly not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination. Depending on who you speak to, it could be anywhere between weeks to months to years, essentially. And I think some of the knock-on consequences of that across all elements of family life have probably barely begun thinking about, really, in terms of sort of longer term consequences. So I guess for me, this next 6 months would be particularly interesting, because when I think about how quickly the huge majority of working parents have had to work definitely more remotely, but I wouldn't necessarily more flexibly. And I think this is where the big challenge is, where I've had a lot more parents who, even though they're at home, and I think you touched upon it, because we're living in anything but usual remote working circumstances, that actually one of the drawbacks of this is that we've been kind of working even more always on. So like the number of emails that I see now at like sort of 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, which almost feels like that chapter 2 after the kids have gone to bed, because actually you had to do homeschooling between 10:30 to 11:30, and then you had to do another bit between like 2 and 3, therefore making up time. It has almost created this like 24-hour or 12-hour clock that people are constantly working in. And I think that's actually going to be one of the biggest challenges, which is when we do whatever the new normal looks like, how do we actually stay true to what flexible working really should be about, and not just pile on more stuff because actually we somehow muddled through for a few months, but actually the sort of physical and mental health consequences have probably barely been able to scratch the surface of yet. So that's kind of my big challenge, I guess, as well, which is how do we, as advocates, as employers, as employees, as allies, make sure that when we do return to it, it is being true to what we want to return to. And I think if we can craft the right culture around it, I think that's always the bigger piece, right? It's, yes, we've been in this position where we've had to work more remotely, but actually has it shifted cultural thinking? Is it something that leaders across organizations are now actively pursuing? I'll be honest with you, I'm seeing a lot more positivity in that route, where actually, they're thinking about phasing people back to office spaces and that sort of thing. So, and actually thinking about more home working, remote working, sort of questioning even the value of consistent physical collaboration. And so actually, I think it will be to a certain degree driven by everything else that's happening across the country. So that is the positive. But I think there are some watch outs in my head that I'm conscious of, particularly around it just not being another thing to ladder just more stuff on us as working parents. Because I think there is all that temptation to say, well, you managed it during lockdown, why can't you manage 120% after as well? I still have a bit of a gut fear about that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think we're going to see a clear dividing line between the employers who get it, who now understand that you cannot work like you were before because you're doing homeschooling or whatever, if you're a parent, and as you say, those that are just piling on and not getting it.
Yeah, totally.
There's going to be quite a clear dividing line, and hopefully, obviously, the former will flourish afterwards, and the latter will not. But we'll wait and see. One of the things I picked up this week, which is I think interesting, like you say, there's a lot of positivity amongst companies towards this at the moment, and I think part of it is to do with the second spike. Is obviously companies were not ready for the first time rounds, and I think sensible companies are going, well, we could be living with this for a while. We could be switching lockdown on and off. We need to be flexible and nimble and able to accommodate whatever comes our way. And getting everybody back in the office, it's going to be pretty daft if, heaven forfend, but it's not impossible by any stretch. 6-9 months down the line, we all have to go back home again.
Yeah, totally.
I think that I hadn't really thought of that before, but from a business point of view, it makes a lot of sense to get on board with what's happening now and embed it so that next time round you're ready to go if there is a next time round.
Yeah. I think some people have been genuinely surprised at a leadership level as well about how much people have been able to achieve, like, genuinely. The thing that I think isn't talked about enough, though, is what sacrifices have had to be made for that to happen. And unfortunately, it's most often time with our kids, to be honest. I think that has been the thing, and I guess I sort of touched upon it as a personal reflection in that LinkedIn post, as you said, that multiplied by the hundreds, thousands, millions unfortunately, it just all points to, our children being the kind of odd one out, unfortunately, in that given scenario, which is just so sad to think about. But it's sometimes those little micro things. It's like, can't do this right now because daddy or mummy have got to do this email. Can't do this because I'm on a call. Just watch TV. Just do that. Just do that. Start to multiply all of those micro occasions that happens. And actually, what sort of future are we setting up for ourselves or for our families? That's probably the bigger question if we are going to live with this for the years to come.
So the follow-up feature is when I'm 44, which
yeah.
alarmingly close. It's not next. It's like getting closer and closer. It's a bit of a worry. But it's the general near future is what it talks to. It's not necessarily specifically when I'm 44. Well, year or 18 months time or something. How do you see this playing out? And given the research you've done, the men, putting into practice the stuff that they say they want to do now, or are people saying it in a survey now, and in a year's time, will we actually be any further forward? What's your view?
It's a very good question. It's a very, very question. I wish I had a crystal ball. I think we have an opportunity now to change it. Employers, advocates, allies, ourselves, parents. I do feel that the next 18 months will be really, really important, not necessarily just for teams and organizations, but as much as anything, like our mental health, and thus also the mental health and physical health of our children. That's the thing that really it bothers me, I have to say, a lot, in that I know the amount I can feel, I can hear, I see it, I hear it constantly every day around just those pressures that are being faced. And I think if we're not careful, as much as it could be a COVID second spike, I mean, there is definitely, a case to answer for in terms of almost like a mental health pandemic, to be honest, because it is unsustainable how a number of working parents have been working. Like, I've not heard a single working parent that has really thrived consistently through this period, like far from it. And if that's going to be the case for the next weeks, months, years, I mean, we're setting ourselves up for a mighty brick wall sooner rather than later.
Well, I tell you that the best way to make things better in 12 months' time is if lots and lots of men sign up to Ian Dinwiddie's 50% off Father's Day. Right?
Up to 50%.
Way to make this change stick.
Up to 50%.
Up to 50%.
Up to 15%, yeah.
Wow.
Up to inspiringdads.co.uk. Big banners everywhere. Big banners at the top.
If they say the magic word from this podcast, then they get 50%, right? If they say I bought cheese string for my partner's anniversary, they get the
if I could get into the back end of Squarespace and make that happen, I would. However, at the moment, it's a blanket 50%, up to 50% off, including some healthy discounts on coaching in celebration of Father's Day, which is obviously on Sunday. Well, however, when this goes out, I might have to extend it. Actually, when this goes out on a Monday, and Father's Day will have been yesterday. We are recording this on a Wednesday, so I may extend this for a day. So special limited edition. If you listen to this now, the offer is open for another day to the end of Monday, because otherwise I've got to edit all of this bit out.
Yes. Have your Father's Day taken care of. You'll be editing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you thoughts on when I'm 44 this week, Ian? What have you been thinking?
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about community. I think community spirit locally here is still really strong. We kind of went into WhatsApp groups were created for lockdown support, and they're still being used, especially in our area. We've got quite a generational, it's quite a wide generational split in houses. I mean, we've got people who are very old and people who are not quite so old. So at 43, then I am one of the youngest adults on this road. Let's put it that way. But everyone's using the WhatsApp, and we've got bunting that's still up on the road next to us. And I was having a chat with a lady up the road who I do know a little bit, but my son and I, we came back from our little cycle ride and we had a chat with her. She was watering her plants, and that sort of sense of community and pulling together, I think, is something that will still be, in a year's time. I think that will still be there, and there'll still be people in their 80s who don't know how to use stickers on WhatsApp, which is hilarious.
I hope you're right, Ian. I don't share your optimism, but I'm not going to rain on your parade. Partly because we haven't got time, but I really hope you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell you what, I'm not going to be doing. What's going to change when I'm 44? I'm not going to be doing Joe Wicks. Yay, Joe Wicks is retiring.
Man, yeah.
He's not retiring, but he's given up the 5-day weeks. He's only doing 2 days a week. He's not that amazing after all, it turns out. Yeah, Saturday doesn't count.
Okay,
Saturday,
so, yeah.
come on, nobody's getting up on a Saturday.
Not doing Saturday either.
If he does that, it's nuts.
You're not a little bit sad?
Nope, delighted. Had enough of it. He's rubbish. He doesn't pay attention anymore. He does a quiz and then he forgets he's doing the quiz. His heart's not in it anymore. Better that everyone just walks away with their head held high, I say. Bye, Joe. You were amazing, but now,
Yeah.
enough.
The kids did ask me, "Are we still going to do it?" Even though he's not on like every day. I was like, maybe. We've got 13 weeks of back episodes. How many have you missed, James? How many did you miss in the end? Do you think?
We missed a week at half term and the bank holidays, so I think we've missed 8 in total by my reckoning. But enough.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think we're going to have time for tips this week, Ian. I don't think we're going to fit them in unless we're very quick.
So. No, I think we can.
Right.
We can.
Here's my tip. Here's my quick tip. Get one of these. It's a gooseneck phone holder. If you need to do Zoom from your phone, you can put it in there. You stick it on the table, then you got a nice solid picture. There you go. Quick, easy tip. Get a gooseneck phone holder off Amazon.
Good.
What's yours, Ian?
Oh, well, I was going to say, Hanson. What's your tip?
I don't really have anything profound. I have to say, like the only thing I've been doing a bit better is
That's not
just
profound.
eat.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not profound.
Nothing profound about that.
You don't have to be profound.
The only thing I'll say, do you know what? Just kind of find the right way to treat yourself a little bit. Like I've just been eating a bit better, cooking a bit better. Just treat yourself a little bit. You deserve it.
Yeah.
Good.
Because you're worth it.
Exactly.
And for me, I guess my tip is around looking for the opportunity to book a holiday, if you can. We've booked a week in November in Center Parks. We've got a weird 2-week half term down here. It's the first time we've had 2 weeks. I prefer an extra week in the summer, although that's a moot point at the moment, I guess. But we've got 2 weeks, end of October and first week in November. It turns out first week in November, nobody else has half term. So Center Parks is a third cheaper than it is the week before. So November in Center Parks, there's my top tip. I may live to regret that. It may be very wet. As long as the pool's open.
Yeah, I don't know if it's
Fingers crossed. Otherwise, there's a lot of tramping around in our welly boots, I guess.
That nap has made you very optimistic, Ian, this week, Ian.
Yeah. Last week I was all over the place. I was like, oh no.
Very, very sunny outlook, which is good. I'm going to resist the temptation to rain on it hard.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for episode 8 of Lockdown Dads.
He's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm James Miller. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to Hanson for joining us. Check out his research on Daddilife.com. Thanks again. Come back next week for another episode. Thank you and goodbye.
Cool. Thank you.